I think I went to school with the kind of standard, I'm going to change the skylines. I'm going to make these incredible, structures. And then immediately in my experience, I realized, oh, the interior environments are where I actually have influence. And that only works well when I understand the people that are in there and I'm seeing them for what their needs are and for who they are and acknowledging that by the way the space is supporting them.
What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. This podcast is sponsored by Berman Falk Hospitality Group, a design-driven furniture manufacturer who specializes in custom case goods and seating for hotel guest rooms. Today's guest is a forward-thinking advocate for integrating brand identity into built environments. He's a major contributor to an award-winning design portfolio and spends time authoring his company's blog. He's a member of the American Institute of Architects and a well-accredited professional. He's an associate principal at Dylot. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Kuby. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Dan. Excited to be here with you.
I'm happy to be here with you as well. It's taken us a long time to get here, but sometimes I know I say I love shortening people's journeys, but sometimes you just have to love the journey you're on. So I want to share with our listeners, number one, Alex is wearing a cardinal colored, which is burgundy if you don't know ish, but we call it cardinal sweater because I'm not sure if it's because, but we both went to the University of Southern California. So fight on Trojans, got to give a shout out there. And also we both got our career starts at Hirsch Bedner and Associates in Santa Monica. I was just an intern. You were a architect, or you graduated with a degree in architecture. So
Yeah, it was before my licensure. Well, we'll have to compare notes on that.
great. I don't even know I think maybe Michael Bedner paid me with beer, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure. I think it was probably illegal how I got paid there. So,
Well, now he's called out. So
exactly. Goat. I'm coming after you, bear. So one other thing, after starting my first company in 2001, I lived up in San Francisco, and then I moved back down to LA. I was calling on customers all over, and Dylot was formerly known as RDC, which was predominantly, I think, architecture. But I remember trying to do some stuff with you guys, and I don't know, maybe it was more architecture, not FF&E. And then I guess I moved to the East Coast, lost track of everything. But then, out of nowhere, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, from like 8 different areas in my life, I started hearing about Dylot. It was unbelievable, like shot out of a cannon. So I know you're not a new company, but I do want to dig into like the transformation. That being said, but before we get there, what's kept you in hospitality? How do you define it? Like what does hospitality mean to you?
I found a real passion in hospitality working at HBA. And over my career, that question has evolved. But where we land now and the kind of design ethos that we've built this studio around is that hospitality is the humanity in the built environment. And that is the way in which we express care and facilitate all of those great high touch point, high emotional engagements that the best hospitality spaces are known for.
Love it. Now, before we spoke, there's this idea of making hospitality more approachable. Because I know, like, we read about all of the luxury and lifestyle that's just taken off, and then there's this K-shaped recovery. But what is approachable hospitality from the built environment with your architecture hat on? Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it's a fundamental acknowledgement of human needs, and that no matter what price point you're engaging in a hotel experience or even outside of that typology, a multifamily experience or retail experience, there are fundamental human qualities that when we see those in people and we acknowledge those needs and validate and provide a supportive environment that hosts those interactions, that is outside of any caliber of luxury. It is just fundamental to the best ways we interact with each other. So when you think of it in that way, the sky's the limit, and you are able to engage with all kinds of different projects, all kinds of different clients, all kinds of different communities that want representation, and to facilitate interactions in all kinds of new and interesting ways. And that is what keeps the job exciting and keeps all of these industries moving in a positive direction, where we don't lose that humanity that kind of connects us all together.
Is there any origin in that idea of affordability, or not affordability, approachability, in hospitality from RDC transforming into Dylot and growing as Dylot? Like, is there a story, a connection, a brand pillar into that?
Sure. Yeah. So when I joined RDC, I guess I'll take a step back. When I joined, this firm was approaching its 50-year anniversary, and it really started as a big box retail architecture firm. A lot of work with Walmart and similar type stores, and retail had just been evolving in an interesting way. And of that kind of backbone, new studios were starting to come into existence, built on the shared resources that the mid-sized architecture firm had in place. And about 10 years ago, one of the new trajectories was to go into a more intentional hospitality direction. So that was the beginning of what now is Dylot. And for the first 7 or 8 years was just known as the hospitality and interiors studio of RDC. And we got to a point where, despite the difficulties of selling a hospitality design service from a retail architecture firm standpoint, we had built up a portfolio of work that was very community driven and value aligned. And that momentum carried us into an internal branding exploration, where we came out the other end as Dylot, which is, again, a focus on hospitality interiors, but bolstered by branding, procurement, and supportive architectural services to really be completely inclusive of everything that needs to go into making spaces the best they can possibly be.
And I have a question. Chris from your team lives in Bentonville, and you have a Bentonville office. Does that have anything to do with the start, like doing a lot of work with Walmart through their meteoric expansion over the years?
Yes, we had kind of a legacy office in that region, and we had kind of separated from that type of work, the Walmart specific clientele. And so the timing was just right for repositioning, and being so centrally located. Chris at the time was building up our procurement offering. And so being kind of centrally located was a huge advantage for that part of what then became Dylot's services, to allow for logistics and travel to everywhere in kind of the continental US. And that was part of the repositioning of that location.
But he was he in Southern California first before moving to Bentonville?
Yes.
And also, okay, so I understand the origin and the importance of Bentonville, but how much for him, we can have a little fun here, did it have to do with all the amazing mountain biking that they have there?
I think that is far more a reason why him and his family have stayed. It's an amazing place. I don't know if you visited, but it is it's an incredible, the Walton family have just invested so much in making it a executive utopia for families. Lots of free museums, lots of great education, amazing bike rides, which Chris is an avid biker, and so is Jackson. So there's a lot of reasons to visit and to stay there.
Yeah, Bentonville is a real jewel and a really special place. And I've not gone, but I'm just newly getting back into cycling, but I would like to go there. So hopefully he'll invite me and we can go for a bike ride somewhere. But I have a feeling he'll just destroy me and leave me in the dust.
I know he would love that. And he is a very good guide. He slowed down to my pace when I visit him. So I think you got me covered on that.
Perfect. Another question I have. So I became a lead accredited professional in 2008. And one of the things I was disheartened about, because my whole world is FF&E, right? And there is this mode of thinking that I read an article. It was handed to me by someone who's been on the podcast twice, Joanna from MindClick. But there's this notion that building a new building, even if it's a LEED, whatever, gold, silver, platinum, that's great. It's a building, it's a core and shell, it's operating. But something about the embodied carbon of all the renovations over 100 years of that building is actually more than what it took to build that building and operate it. I have done a little bit of research into well. I mean, I know a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, but can you just tell me how well fits into the overall place of sustainability from the built environment?
Yeah, they kind of get paired together. Well is definitely more a focus on the actual well-being of the inhabitants of the space. And so it touches things like water quality, air quality. So, you know, when you're trying to create a well space, there are also a lot of programs that need to be supported to get that accreditation. So
Mhm.
it's far less the construction process and far more operations and some key decisions around systems. But you really are looking at like the qualitative space in terms of its impact on human health and well-being. Our office is a well certified location, and that is something that we experience with fitness programs and healthy food options and those type of programs layered in on top of the systems that keep the air to a certain level of standard and the water purification and all those components that kind of go unseen.
What was interesting is even though from a lead perspective, the FF&E didn't really check any boxes, unless you were doing built-in things. But through that, we were able to change all of our supply chains. I'm not just saying just for me, but like for everyone out there, so that you can get before that 2008, it was you had to pay extra for indoor air quality as it pertains to manufacturing. So it was hard to find MDF or plywood or other panels without added urea and formaldehyde. So from an indoor air quality perspective, and then just from polyurethane finishes and everything else, the technology from the likes of Sherman-Williams and Benjamin Moore and you name all the other ones, they changed their chemistry so that the off gassing wouldn't happen when it was in its final resting place. So it is exciting to see all this. I just wish it would take. What do you think is? Why do you think FF&E is? Oh, actually, I'll tell. My theory is because FF&E is the last line item on the budget, so people don't care. But I think in hospitality and office, and you can argue other silos of commercial real estate, that's the part that the people connect with the most. Like that's the lived experience. But why do you think that there hasn't been more attention paid to it?
I mean, the money drives the focus, I think is the short answer. And I think you hit the nail on the head. By the time ownership groups are really looking at building out the case goods and the FF&E, I think they rely a lot on the experts they have hired to kind of carry those things forward. Um, and that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time on. We care a lot about FF&E, obviously. And we have to kind of step aside from lead and well, kind of like the formal accreditation and remember that we have a responsibility in our work and those values need to inform how we are designing and how we're specifying and the partnerships that we make and just finding alignment that those values are carried forward to the end product. So that was another really big piece of building the Dylot brand was really understanding what do these kind of catch-all terms like sustainability and wellness and other values that we are aligned with. What does that mean in actual practice? And one example, a huge contributor to carbon, which is this is a polarizing subject, but is just animal products in general. And so, we're not going to control what people eat or what they consume, but we won't specify unless there's like a really specific reason to. And, even when it comes down to lunch and learns and things like that, if it's on our tab, we just don't purchase on animal products because we just carry forward that commitment to sustainability and carbon footprint to all of the ways we engage with our work, even in kind of the ripple effect.
Wow, that's actually quite a commitment. That's remarkable. I never actually considered that. I mean, I considered that the animal product is a tremendous contributor to off gas or to carbon emissions, but I'd never considered a policy to kind of put your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
It's the beauty of building a new thing. You can really leverage what you've built up to kind of move the needle forward. Another piece of that is we are privileged to be in the room when big decisions are being made. And if we can kind of just move the needle in a positive direction, whether it's that or accessibility or other kind of things that maybe are viewed as nice to have, but maybe costs or extra effort that otherwise would go overlooked. It's kind of our opportunity to kind of really lean into where the value is in doing that. And especially in hospitality, but across all typologies now, alignment of values is what drives the market. And so if you're spending $2,500 for a wellness, a night in a wellness hotel, I think you're the type of person that really does care about the sourcing and the impact at kind of a larger scale. Not always, but I think if you survey the guests of those properties, you would more overwhelmingly see that they do appreciate that mindfulness is something they're contributing to.
But I had an epiphany earlier this week, and the point is, I love saying this. So sorry, listeners, if you heard me say this 100 times, but or maybe 200 times, but I really feel strongly from the book, The Power of One, and the movie, The Power of One. A waterfall starts with just one drop of water, right? And even something as simple as saying you're not on your own dime going to pay for animal products in a lunch and learn or meet if it's on your ticket. At Berman Falk, we're always trying to do things that are good, like being in alignment with our values, just internally with people, but also with the environment. And so we're embarking on this mission to plant 22,000 something trees in Asia and in North America. I forget exactly where the number 22,388 comes from, but it's a specific number and I should know that better. But someone in social media said, "Oh, why are you doing that? You need to plant 1 trillion trees." And I was like, okay. But then I was like, I didn't respond, but I'm like, okay, look, I asked the internet how many companies are out there in the world, and it's 200 to 350 million companies. And then I was like, okay, well, if we could somehow recruit 44.6 million companies to plant 22,000 trees, that's either 22.3% of all companies in the world or 12.7% of all companies in the world to plant 22. It makes everything way more manageable. And what I wanted to say to that troll was, well, why don't you just embark on an initiative to get 12.7% of all other companies in the world to plant 22,000 trees? And I think that sometimes the problem can feel so big that we don't know how to take that first bite. So thank you, troll, for trolling, but also screw you, because think bigger and see how you can enlist everyone else to make small change, because they add up.
You're absolutely right. I mean, if you continue to zoom out and process the scale, it's to a point where you would be reasonable to be kind of paralyzed and not take action. And I think that that's just something that we can lean into the impact wherever that is. And, in the rooms we find ourselves in, try to move the needle forward and be happy that that makes us feel good. And that the time we're spending, the work we're doing, completes us more holistically as people, and that we're pursuing our values through our work.
Yeah. And it's progress, not perfection, people. Let's all make a lot of little changes make a huge difference. So I want to go back to that notion of approachable hospitality, right? So can you think of a project or a part of a project in your Dylot experience that kind of highlights a challenge or a constraint in the hospitality space or built environment of the hospitality world? And then how did you address that challenge or constraint and make it more approachable? And approachable in what way?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to kind of take that. I think approachability is maybe a subcategory of accessibility that I like to kind of keep in my frame of perspective. And because accessibility is more about equity of experience and inclusivity of the levels of hospitality that we're going for. And so that gets us back on track with those values that we were talking about before, about kind of making sure that we're mindful of the human experience and the qualities and the validation that go into an environment that is supportive. So when it comes to maybe less than, luxury brand properties that are still bringing in tons of people that are equally in need of support and validation and all the great things that go into making life wonderful to live, um, going as far as pulling our understanding of brand standards from luxury properties and even kind of back of house requirements of how they operate and applying those to select service or even small scale boutique properties, just leveraging that knowledge base and experience to enhance the operations, um, really give the property the opportunity to elevate their service above the expectations of the guest. And whenever you do that, it's a huge victory. So that's an example of providing a foundation in the planning and the design of the space that allows for the operations to really lean in and make those meaningful connections.
Thank you. And then looking forward into the next 5 years, as far as from that making full service experiences more accessible, or just hospitality experiences more accessible, what are the changes that you're seeing, or the challenges that you're seeing, or the constraints that are being put on you from, it could be from municipalities, it could be from larger brands or ownership groups. Like, where do you think those challenges are coming from over the next 5 years, and how do you win? Who's going to win at those challenges?
Fundamentally, the biggest challenges coming to us are around capital and making sure that we're deploying resources mindfully. Um, so when I think about your question, I think about how we direct funding. We do a lot of repositioning work. We do a lot of up branding or you know, new ownership kind of personalization of projects. So there's kind of a whole myriad of existing conditions that you're just kind of
Did you say Marriott or Myriad?
myriad. I might have slipped, but
No, you said Myriad. I heard Marriott. Bringing us back to earth. No, but keep going.
yeah. So when you're really responsible or stewarding the assignment of capital to repositioning projects, a lot of trust is put into you, and a lot of those challenges that our developer partners are experiencing kind of land on your plate. So you get a lot of exposure to, the finance side of the industry, and then I think has given us a lot of clarity around why pressure seems to be in places where you wouldn't otherwise expect it. So the way in which we're reporting, especially on the procurement side, spending and allocating funds and separating services from costs, and there's a lot more, I think, leaning on the design services for accounting and accountability. And that's something that we've really leaned into. We've built out the whole procurement branch here because we're the type of group that when there is a challenge, we want to have the opportunity to lean into it and be part of the solution. But that only happens when you completely understand the big picture of what we're trying to solve for. So those challenges and others are why we're really leaning into the integration of services. I mentioned earlier that, it's a interior design house that is bolstered by a branding agency that's integrated, a procurement agency that's integrated, and a supportive architecture team. And what that allows for is, whether the challenge is municipal based, or it's cost based, or it's design based, or it's, any kind of combination of those, we have the right experts in place to build the appropriate team for the project and navigate those challenges.
I appreciate that. And it's very resonant with me. I know that we've spoken about these fast track projects that we've been doing, where saving even 2 months of time on a project can return 7x of faster revenue to an ownership group. And that, to me, I could get my head around it. There's a real value proposition. One of the things that I've always struggled with, and I'm starting to see the light, but I still want to understand the sausage making behind it, is I've been to a couple of hotels and resorts, general managers conferences, and also, what's that other one? Preferred vendor or preferred partner, strategic partner conferences. And they spend so much time talking about ROI of where they allocate their capital on either development or renovations or anything expending capital. And what I find fascinating is whenever they do a project, they establish a targeted ROI and they're blowing them out of the water, right? So um, I've also been finding myself reading their quarterly reports. And if anyone wants to know about what I'm trying to talk about inelegantly, go on and look at their quarterly reports. And like in the middle of it, they'll start talking about ROI on their transformational capital programs, et cetera, et cetera. But I always thought it was so difficult, especially if you take a renovation, to how do you know what's going to really drive the ROI, right? In that allocation of capital. Now, as an architect, you're building a core and shell, but you're also doing the interiors. But sometimes it's just a wild ass guess of how you're going to get that. But they've done it in a scientific way, and I really want to get to the bottom of the sausage making. So maybe that's a different conversation with them. But when you're looking at repositioning a hotel and there are goals of ROI, how do you know or where to direct that capital and direct your thinking to get the most bang for your buck or the most outsized or overweight return?
It's a super valuable metric to know because that really gives you the best look at the level of luxury the property is going to be, when you really know the money that's going to go into the renovation or the repositioning. So having the goal and kind of the investment number allows you to kind of understand how much room there is for improvement. And then you have the foundation of applying your knowledge base to how you're going to strategically deploy it into the improvements. There might be a really tight investment and kind of an aspirational return expectation. And then you really need to lean into those high touch point moments, circulation spaces, public areas, and maybe the guest rooms, you pull out some places in there, or maybe the brand is in opposition of that. And it really is reducing program in the public spaces and punching above your weight on the interior of the guest rooms. And so you have to kind of take those data points and bring them all together with the brand requirements, or if it's an independent, if you're creating brand identity, maybe you're bringing that information into the branding work up front so that you can kind of position the property appropriately for those goals. Branding is probably the most valuable tool to engage as early as possible because you can really get a good understanding of the property identity. And when you have that, you can understand the opportunities for expression throughout. And that being the foundation of your design work just really inherently targets the effort where it's most meaningful.
Okay. So now let's do a hypothetical, or you can draw on this from a past project. New project, or maybe it's an existing building. They're bringing you on with your purchasing, your design, and your branding. They have certain aspirational goals in their pro forma of targets they need to hit. You win the project. How do you get down to brass tacks and say, okay, I hear what you're trying to do. And hey, I think you're sandbagging here, or this is way too aspirational. How do you create alignment between all the different stakeholders for the work that you're about to embark on, number one? And then number two, when the project closes out and it's been stabilized or open for a year or making it through their high season, do you ever go back and like check, hey, did we do it or not? Or do you just kind of move on to the next one and hear what you hear?
Well, answer the first question first. So we start every project with a visioning workshop. Sometimes we sell that as an independent service. And what that does is it gets all the stakeholders and information in the room with us. And depending on the size of the project, it can be half day, full day, multi-day endeavor. We have all these kind of custom tasks and tools that we use to kind of pull conversation to destinations that are informative for us to create a hierarchy of goals and values for the project. And then after that, we have a deliverable that comes out that it's basically the foundational document for the whole project to come. And that is to get alignment with all the stakeholders, to make sure the direction that we see and the opportunities that we've explored have they're anchored in the context of the overall project parameters. And we sell that as something that, you can take this and bring it to anybody as like, kind of like, what you want to do with the project. But most often it just leans itself into a concept phase then where we go more into identity work and narrative crafting with that all kind of in mind. And so when our clients come to us and they have great visibility in finances and other goals that they have, those workshops just have much more value because we can really tune the service. It's actually beneficial for us to craft our full service agreement after that happens, because a lot of times you just get a PIP or some sort of kind of high level explanation of what they're trying to do with the project. And there's a lot of room for that project to go in many different directions. So that really focuses into a trajectory that you can then carry into the next stages of work and make sure that you're not leaving anybody behind. It's a way of getting alignment at the start.
And that's interesting. So your visioning workshop can be standalone, or it can be you win a project and it's part of your overall scope of services. But let's just pretend you win the project. Are you always doing the visioning workshop first?
Always. Yeah. It can be a more minor thing if it's like a client coming to us with a very clear understanding of what they do, and they do this all the time. And this is something that we're just kind of plugging into an established workflow. And then we pull the pieces out of that workshop, and maybe it's more a kickoff meeting, kind of a couple subjects that we kind of fill in the blanks on that. But we do always like to deliver that trajectory package that basically aligns the direction for the project on not a super finite path, but like a general trajectory that then we can make sure that our conceptual studies and branding and narrative crafting, they all are in alignment with those goals. A lot of times we're brought in years after people have been thinking about these projects. So we really do ourselves a disservice by not trying to extract all of the thoughts and knowledge base existing on the client side that has gone into this to inform how we start and how we shape the project deliverable.
Hey, everybody. We've been doing this podcast for over 3 years now. And one of the themes that consistently comes up is sustainability. And I'm just really proud to announce that our sponsor, Berman Falk Hospitality Group, is the first within our hospitality industry to switch to sustainable and recyclable packaging, eliminating the use of styrofoam. Please check out their impact page in the show notes for more info.
One of the things that I find interesting about your model, I know you do architecture, interiors, and purchasing and branding, right? But in the hospitality space, typically it's designing. Sometimes you'll see, well, you have purchasing companies, you have design companies, you have branding companies. Every once in a while, you'll see a company that does all three, but that's rarer than sometimes. Infrequently, you'll see a company that does design and purchase in the same house, like a Getty's Group or you guys, or I don't know who else does that.
I think HBA has a procurement arm also.
There's not many, but like, why do you think the market has set itself up like that so that there's so few that do design and purchase together? Because in my mind, I understand keeping the wall between the two, and it makes sure that the owner is getting the best value and there's no potential or perceived conflict of interest. But I have to think, and I've actually not just think, I know that when design firms have design and purchase under the same thing, they save so much time. So why do you think the market has created where there's so few players doing both?
I think that this is just a recorrection from, where a lot of industries went in terms of specialization and processes and formality. And, I think there's probably the right project where those specific houses for those specialties is the right fit. We only procure what we design. It's not like we're a procurement agency trying to procure stuff for other people. The reason why we do procurement is because we want our designers to be the most informed designers when they're designing about the cost consequences of their designs. And we also want our procurement agents to be the most informed procurement agents around preserving the design integrity that we've worked so hard to craft. And the efficiencies in the workflow are almost kind of secondary to that, although that's where there is a financial benefit. So we kind of say that first, but it really came from a place of people want a single source of responsibility. And I think that we have a track record of leaning into the responsibility of our services. And when you are relying on third party resources, you just really need to build up great relationships over time. And there are some things that really impact your design, and procuring your custom case goods or manufacturing your specialty items and those type of parts of the work. They just have a lot of opportunities for misalignment, miscommunication, extra time, extra cost, logistics getting in the way. So the more of that we have insight into, and the more of that we can control on behalf of our clients, the better product I think we can deliver
in a shorter timeline.
Yeah. And it's the same on the branding side. A lot of interior designers, I think they see themselves as branding agencies as well, because you are narrative crafting, you're storytelling, you're building these amazing experiences. And I think some of the best branding minds actually live in design studios that are creating these environments. And that was another efficiency that we saw, that we can really deepen the quality of our narrative crafting and the application of that narrative, not just into our design, but into our signage and wayfinding and all these other kind of touch points, the kind of operational OS&E type of elements that come in after the fact. It can be so much more intertwined if the group mind holistically is involved in the execution of all those assets.
This has been coming up a lot over the past couple of years on this I've only been doing the podcast for 4 or 5 years, but maybe in the industry is what I meant to say. I've been noticing most projects now have a branding agency, whether it's in the design firm or a third party, come up and set the tone first. It helps with their investors decks, everything, but it lays that story out much better. And what I've seen is, since development companies and ownership groups have been in more kind of front loading that branding work, projects have actually gotten much easier to produce product for, because a lot of the decision making with respect to approvals and finishes, or all the nuanced stuff, it's pretty clearly laid out when there's a good brand book or a good storybook or narrative at the beginning of a project. Have you noticed that over your career as well? Like, tell me what you see from your perspective, because I'm seeing it from like that last line item on the budget of FF&E, but like, where are you seeing it from architecture design?
Yeah, that's the whole reason why we really focused on branding as a core offering, because it is the fundamental alignment of all the other creative services. If you can get an incredible brand identity established up front, then your architecture team can craft environments, or at least spaces, that can host in the way that identity wants. Your interiors team can fill those in with rich touch points and opportunities for connection and service, again, aligned with that identity. All of your consultants are serving the crafting of the space in the spirit of that personality. And then even towards the end of the project, when you're doing case goods and furniture, like the cast of characters that those elements represent in the space, they play a role in that overall narrative. And that is, to your point earlier, a very high touch point, a very high level of interaction for the guest experience. And so having a real continuity of that identity expressed at all of that kind of different level of scale, and in all of those different touch points, from how you view the building when you're approaching it in your Uber or your rideshare, whatever you're taking, to entering the lobby, to entering your room, to touching the putting your key down on the table, all those kind of touch points at all those different scales, having that through line and that personality kind of hosting that experience that is the environment's personality, is a really powerful thing.
I don't know if I've shared this with a lot of people, but it has come up. In the intro, I said that you spend time authoring Dylot's blog, and it's a beautiful blog. I hope everyone takes a look at it. But oftentimes people will ask me, why did I start a podcast? And typically I say, it's because it was COVID. I couldn't meet with anyone, and I was starting another company. I just had to keep myself busy, which is true. But also in that, I was writing a blog for Misha and I on our 967 website. And after a while, it's hard. It's really hard. And this was before AI could help. But I was like, oh my God, I love listening to podcasts. I could start a podcast and just talk to people and then plagiarize myself. So it was almost born out of laziness. but I have not gotten to the plagiarizing of myself yet, but there's enough content out there that it is. But so the blog is beautiful. Thank you for doing it. Everyone should check it out. But in doing the blog, you started that after the transition from RDC to Dylot, correct?
Yeah, I think before I didn't have a great avenue for that content. I was just kind of posting LinkedIn articles because there wasn't like a branded space for those thoughts specifically to live in. And so, yeah, it's been motivating to have that kind of space now to carry forward those thoughts and those conversations.
Right. And this is my long way around of getting to this question, which is like, from your experience, being there from RDC to Dylot in that transition, and then being able to author a branded blog, right? You were there when it was RDC. I just want to confirm.
Yes. Yeah, I was there when it was Retail Design Collaborative, then RDC, and now Dylot. And RDC still is a studio that does retail work, and they do incredible grocery projects and all kinds of other things. So we're just kind of a separate studio now in that house.
Perfect. Apologies for any confusion to everyone out there. But my question is, and this is from your experience, oftentimes firms get to a certain size and they might spin out things. They might like the Dylot experience, or they might want to do a complete brand reposition because, oh, like what you saw, everything you said earlier with Dylot, oh, this is why we need to be called Dylot, and this is how we're attacking the hospitality market. What if other people are considering that or in the middle of that? What mindset shift did you find harder than you expected in doing that? And I think and I see the end result in your blog, right? But like, what's the hardest mindset shift?
I still struggle with this. I think that when you're in a space full of opportunity, which was like the privilege of joining an established thing and having kind of a foundation to build on, you have a tendency to want to be everything to everybody. And I think that niching down is something that you hear a lot in all of the books that you read and all of the, little clips that you see about kind of business leaders, but it really has proven true. And I think Dylot has given us the opportunity to really define specifically who we are, specifically the service and the reasons the services exist. And even still, I struggle turning down projects that seem really interesting, but aren't really aligned with that goal. Every now and then you just get some really interesting, like airport terminal or something that just isn't really in your wheelhouse, but would be such an awesome opportunity to deploy your design ethos in a new environment. And so when it's appropriate, we do try to take those chances and try out new things, because what we've learned in our experience, both supporting retail efforts, big and small, and multifamily and grocery, is that hospitality belongs in all built environments. And what we know on the hospitality side of things just improves everything, because it's about your guests or your residents feeling seen and feeling supportive. And that's a great endeavor to pursue.
Give me an example of some grocery work that you've done.
Yeah, we just opened a store in Utah City, which is an enormous development, which is super cool. And there's a lot of really interesting things around how they're sharing resources on this literally brand new city that they're creating just south of Salt Lake. But they started with a grocery store, and we have an amazing grocery team. They do a lot of the Erewhon work.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to say Erewhon. That place is amazing, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will share for those of you who don't know Erewhon. I think it's like nowhere backwards, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. It's its own word. But they were in LA, and I was there 2 years ago. It started as this little place, and now they're growing. But I went in there with my son, and I was like, "Oh, Vivian, my daughter, said that there's a $22 smoothie here. Like, what the heck is that all?" He's like, "Oh, I want to get one." I was like, "No way." He got one. It was a strawberry smoothie. It was the greatest smoothie I've ever had in my life. Did I like paying $23 for it? They're probably like $40 now. No, but it was awesome. It was an incredible experience. But anyway, keep going on your.
Well, yeah. So that's a good example of just how the grocery space has evolved. And so anyway, this new city being developed in Utah started with a grocery store because that was going to be the communal hub. And our grocery team brought us in as kind of a partnership because it really was a hospitality endeavor. that they wanted to basically treat as an amenity to this new community. And so those are the partnerships that are really interesting. It's called Bella's, and it opened, I believe, November last year. And it's just wonderful to work with like-minded people on the development side that see that these spaces, like the grocery store is kind of the last public square. It's like one of very few places that you go out and you're kind of around your community, and reliably so, if you're not just getting delivery at this point. So there's a lot of value in that, and partnering with local, florists and other kind of complements to kind of infuse more life. It really did give what is still a largely under construction city a heartbeat and a soul as a starting point. And so that's what makes like a grocery project really interesting to us. We wouldn't probably be involved in the Ralph's work or Aldi or the kind of things that are just kind of, really awesome spaces in their own right, but not particularly individualized. So yeah, that's where hospitality works in that grocery sector.
So funny you say Ralph's. I remember when I was at SC, I think my junior year, I moved to Hollywood, like, what street was that? Sycamore between Beverly and First. So basically La Brea between Beverly and First.
Mm-hmm.
And just a couple blocks down, there was this place. It was Rock and Roll Ralph's. And I would go there. This was like before phones. Like, I think maybe I had a pager, but you would go there and you would meet people. You'd like find dates and like go, like people were there shopping, but also I guess it was like the original Tinder or dating app. Like you went to just Rock and Roll Ralph's and you met people and you got their digits and you went on dates. It was awesome.
We need more spaces like that.
We do.
I'm really lucky to have an awesome wife and two little girls, but I just know that it's hard to meet people in general. And I think that's because we've been eroding these public spaces.
Yeah. Or you can go to Erewhon in Pacific Palisades and be like, and you're standing in the meat section. You just talk to the person next to you. You're like, I cannot believe that this bacon is $73 a pound. It's crazy, but at least it's an icebreaker. You get to talk about it.
That's right. It's a unifying experience.
Yeah. You said something a couple of minutes ago about niching down, and I find the most successful brands niche down, and they create a real specific target at something at the expense of all else. And I'm going to be interviewing someone soon. I went up to their lodge up in British Columbia, and it's like a ski lodge, but it's small. And they have a very specific way of doing things. And there was a sticker on the wall or a framed thing. And I just wrote it down here, but I can't wait to talk to them about that. It says, "We're not for everyone, but the people who like us a lot."
I love that.
So in creating all these channels, from grocery to hospitality to education to everything that you guys do, how do you niche down, and how do you find those people? Who are your clients at Dylot that like you a lot?
Project managers love us. Those kind of, in between ownership and the project role. I think we do a lot in our service that makes us, great to work with. I think we tell our team this all the time. The level we compete at, everyone applying for the job can do great design. And I think we do excellent design. We're, really talented in that regard, but you're kind of competing. Your numbers are basically similar. Your capabilities are basically similar. We have an edge on integration if that's a goal, but where you really win these projects and where people really value it is you're trying to sell yourself, like your personality, your lean into responsibility. Like this, it is a service industry design. And you have to remember that these people are choosing who they're going to spend the next 5 years or 10 years, depending on the size of the project, working with, and the people that they want to spend time solving hard problems with. So it's something that we take really seriously, and we're working into our training on kind of the next level of leaders in our group, is allowing your professionalism to be enhanced by your own personality, which I think is super important, because you do want to be working with someone who's authentic, especially if you're creating a space that's trying to be authentic to what it is. You want people that are comfortable with who they are and bringing their expertise, but their personality into the work. And that is where I think we kind of edge out some of the competition, and we built really great relationships by doing that.
Okay, let's go back in time. It's 2008, 7, 9, whenever you got your diploma. You're walking up Truesdale Boulevard, Tommy Trojan's over your left shoulder, Doheny Library's over your right. You're going, the Boulevard's there. You parked your car up at the Shrine. You're getting in your car, but the Alex I'm talking to right now stops you on the way to Jefferson Boulevard. What advice do you have for your younger self?
That's a really good question. There is a seriousness that I had at that time in wanting to really be a established professional who knew everything and was reliable and could be trusted with the hardest stuff. And that was just totally unreasonable considering the 0 years of experience I had. And so I think that there was a lot of wanting to prove myself that I needed to learn about at that time, just to make space for the journey, like you kind of say, and to lean into the not knowing and to ask the questions and to not try to fake it till you make it, but really try to lean into the people that you can sense are great educators and work really closely with those people along the way. I was really lucky to find those people. And there were some wonderful people that would like kind of sit and draw with you and talk out loud how you visualize the space and the experiences. And, I think everyone in some degree kind of sees themselves as an educator on our team. And that's one of the pieces of our culture I really love, because we have an amazing pipeline of internships into designer roles that has been established for the past 5 or 6 years now. We're really benefiting from building people up from that point in time in their pre-career into the amazing design team that we have now that's really kind of turning out all this great work. And so the emphasis on, of course you don't know it all. I don't know it all still. Like you have to know so much about so much in this industry, even just in one of the services we provide, that it will always be a team endeavor and you will always be encountering new challenges. So just being okay with not knowing and just being genuine about learning.
Now, when you said serious, I'm picturing this stern, serious, young, aspiring architect walking up to Jefferson Boulevard, but that's also like the architect kind of archetype.
It is. I had to grow out of that. I think I went to school with the kind of standard, I'm going to change the skylines. I'm going to make these incredible, structures. And then immediately in my experience, I realized, oh, the interior environments are where I actually have influence. And that only works well when I understand the people that are in there and I'm seeing them for what their needs are and for who they are, and acknowledging that by the way the space is supporting them.
So then fast forward a little bit more. I think I still remember the address, 3817A Nebraska Avenue.
Yep, you got it.
Is that it? Holy shit. Okay. Hirsch Bedner or HBA, whatever it was at that point. So there's this serious you. And I know that first impressions make lasting impressions. I want you to paint a picture of the first moment you met Misha Bedner. And did he help you chill out?
Misha was working on the marketing team at the time. And I don't think I met him for a few weeks after I started working. But I remember immediately being like, oh, this is like a real person. Which, when you're new in your career, you're just trying to, again, play this professional when you don't know what a professional even is. And I think there was just an openness to Misha and a comfort that he had that made me really kind of take a full breath for the first time and just, not be so serious and just kind of allow myself to open up a little bit, which is a great thing. I don't think I've ever told him that. So hopefully he listens to your podcast.
Oh, I'm going to make him. We're going to send him the clip. We're going to clip it, send it to him. My first meeting with Misha, I don't know why I'm going on this Misha tangent, but Misha, I love you. I'd heard about Misha since I was 12 years old, like every Friday night at Mikey's family dinners, like when I was up there for Shabbat. And then, Misha would, like, they do this family circle. It's amazing. And I wish I did that in my family. I don't know what's holding me back, but anyway, they would express appreciation for Michael and Misha and Ilya and Lenny Parker and Doug Parker and Mitch Parker, all the Parkers. There's so many Parkers. And when I came to USC, I was living in Floor Tower, which is no longer there anymore. So I met all my like USC people. And then Misha's cousin, who I met a couple of years ago, she was out east looking at colleges. She picked me up and took me to the Firehouse in Santa Monica. Remember, on Rose and like Wayne or something like that. And he was working there as a waiter, and he had like dyed hair. He had an apron, and he was like serving bodybuilders breakfasts. Like, I don't know if Arnold Schwarzenegger was there, but like Flex Wheeler and all these huge dudes. And then there was like skinny Misha with like a chain wallet in kind of his maybe post-punk stage. And then we became fast friends from there. Oh my God. Now I have to call Misha. I'm like I'm getting nostalgic for Misha. But yeah, it was his Smiley and his beat to shit 1983 Toyota Celica, maybe. Wow. I don't know how I'm remembering this. Anyway, it's good to walk down memory lane.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before we started recording, but it's so rare that you get the opportunity to reflect. And I feel like, life just drives us forward, and when you have these kind of longer form conversations, and you can just kind of picture the road you've been on and how it shapes the way you make decisions and the way that you're building your team or building your family life or whatever it is, that's a super important endeavor to do, and reflect and find that gratitude and all those moments you didn't realize were so impactful along the way.
Totally. This has been wonderful. I'm glad I got to teleport back to USC. So thank you for that. But if people wanted to learn more about you and Dylot, what's a good way for them to connect besides your blog, which everyone needs to go check out?
Sure. Yeah. Dylot.com is the website. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just Alex at Dylot.com. So, that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. We have an Instagram and LinkedIn and all that stuff, which is easy enough to find on the website. But the Instagram's great. We have a lot of people that are throughout the studio involved in it. So you get a lot of different glimpses of everything going on all the time. So check it out.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the walk down memory lane. And it's been great to get to know you over these past meteoric 2 years or year and a half or whatever it's been. So I wish you continued success.
Thank you. Likewise. It's a rocket ship. We're both riding it.
Yes. And thank you to all of our listeners. Without you, I wouldn't be here speaking to Alex and Dylot and learning about all of their strengths and their rise and sharing experience of going through a brand change and niching down. I think that's my takeaway, niching down and the memory of Misha. So thank you. I appreciate you all, and we'll catch you next time.